back, and now for the news in detail. Turkey has threatened to strike Syrian government forces anywhere if any more of its troops are harmed in Syria. Speaking in Ankara, President Tayyip Erdogan said Turkey will not tolerate more violations of the truce in Syria. The remarks come after 13 Turkish soldiers were killed in recent clashes in Idlib. Moscow insists the groups fighting in northwestern Syria are terrorists. Erdogan said the Syrian regime, Russian forces and Iran-backed militants are committing a massacre in the province. He said Ankara is determined to push Syrian forces beyond Turkish posts in the region by the end of this month.
If there is the smallest injury to our soldiers on the observation posts or other places, I am declaring from here that we will hit the regime forces everywhere from today, regardless of the lines of the Sochi Agreement or Idlib.
Earlier, President Erdogan spoke to his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin to discuss the Idlib clashes. The Kremlin said both the leaders agreed on the importance of implementing Russo-Turkish agreements on Syria. Now moving on, the US troops have clashed government forces after one of their patrols came under attack near the city of Qamishli in Syria. American forces killed one regime loyalist during a firefight in the government-held village of Khirbat Amo, east of Qamishli. US warplanes launched one strike on the Syrian forces before the confrontation ended, with the American convoy pulling out of the area. A firefight also broke out between civilians and the US forces after the incident. A war monitor said that a Russian patrol arrived on the scene to calm the situation. Meanwhile, Russia carried out strikes in Idlib, killing 4 civilians. The White Helmets civil defense group said 3 others were wounded in the attack. Iran has rejected US allegations that its satellite program is a cover-up for the ballistic missile testing. The US has alleged technologies used to launch satellites into orbit are virtually identical to those used in longer-range missiles. Talking to the media in Tehran, Defense Minister Amir Hatami said Iran's satellite launch has no military dimension and is purely a civilian matter. He said the satellite launcher is a completely non-defensive subject and it's the definite and absolute right of the Iranian nation. The minister said there is no prohibition in the world against such satellite programs. The U.S. Justice Department has charged 5 people in Texas and New York with conspiring to break oil sanctions on Iran. In a statement, the department said the suspects plan to buy oil from Iran and sell it to a Chinese refinery. The department charged the 5 persons with 1 count of conspiracy and another of breaking the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. The government says defendants spent 8 months devising a scheme to violate U.S. sanctions. It said if convicted, the quintet each face a maximum sentence of 25 years and a fine of up to $1.25 million. The 5 have been named as Nicholas Haven of New York and Robert Twaits, Nicholas Fox, Zhenyu Wang, and Daniel Ray Lane from Texas. The UN says Libyan commander Khalifa Haftar's forces have blocked flights carrying its staff to and from Libya. In a statement, the international body said that the Libyan National Army has refused its regular flights permission to the land. The statement says the UN is concerned stopping flights will interrupt its humanitarian aid operations in the country. The UN envoy to Libya, Ghassan Salameh, has been mediating between Haftar and the government of the National Accord. The Libyan National Army has accused Salameh of being biased against it, but the UN rejects the allegations. Meanwhile, Britain has asked the UN Security Council to vote on a resolution supporting a ceasefire in Libya today. The vote will be the first binding text adopted since fighting flared in April last year. Britain has asked the UN Security Council to vote on a resolution supporting a ceasefire in Libya today. The vote will be the first binding text adopted since fighting flared in April last year. Last week, a draft resolution on Libyan ceasefire was also presented in the Council, but it was rejected by Russia. Moscow blocked the draft due to inclusion of the word mercenary in the text. Meanwhile, the Libyan parliament has called on the UN's Libya mission not to put the constitution draft up for discussion in future talks. The parliamentarian said neither the UN nor any other body have the right to approve or reject the constitution. NATO is set to hold a two-day ministerial meeting in Brussels today. The security alliance will discuss progress in ending the war in Afghanistan, building stability in the Middle East, and challenges posed by Russia's missile systems are also up for discussion.
Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says NATO defense ministers will discuss options for non-combat operations in the Middle East. He said despite challenging circumstances, Afghan forces are getting stronger and are helping to create conditions for peace. The Secretary General said the Taliban must commit to a reduction in violence and show that they are genuinely committed to peace before any deal. The conference agenda includes mulling an increased presence in Iraq to relieve the burden on the US-led coalition against ISIS.
We are discussing what more NATO can do, but again, before we have made any final decisions, I think it's a bit early for me to announce those decisions, but we will see what more we can do. Yeah.
NATO is also set to devise defensive measures to counter what it sees as a breach of the INF Treaty by Russia.
U.S. State Secretary Mike Pompeo has phoned Afghan President Ashraf Ghani and Chief Executive Abdullah. During the separate conversations, Pompeo informed both about progress in the U.S. talks with the Taliban. In a series of tweets, Ghani said this is a welcoming development with regards to regional peace and stability. Ghani said he was informed about the Taliban's proposal to bring a significant reduction in violence. Meanwhile, Abdullah said current dialogue can lead to an agreement, paving the way for intra-Afghan talks. Abdullah said he appreciates the ongoing efforts and hoped the Taliban will take necessary steps towards peace. Moving on to the US, where Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders has won the Democratic presidential primary in the state of New Hampshire. With over 90% of the votes counted, Sanders took almost 26% of the vote, with former Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg on just over 24%. More in this report.
As the US gears up to elect a new president later this year, the Democratic primary is becoming interesting. Bernie Sanders now appears to be leading the Democrats' left-wing liberals, while Pete Buttigieg is leading the moderate centrists. Ex-frontrunners Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren and ex-Vice President Joe Biden finished in 4th and 5th. Both Buttigieg and Sanders have asked for a partial recanvassing of last week's Iowa caucus. Sanders says the New Hampshire win is a milestone on his road to victory against President Donald Trump.
This victory here is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump. We are going to unite together and defeat the most dangerous president in the modern history of this country.
Meanwhile, Buttigieg congratulated Sanders for the victory.
I want to congratulate my competitors and their supporters on their campaigns here in New Hampshire. I admired Senator Sanders when I was a high school student. I respect him greatly to this day, and I congratulate him on his strong showing tonight.
Technology entrepreneur Andrew Yang and Colorado Senator Michael Bennet both dropped out of the race. The next stop in the Democratic Party journey to November is the Nevada caucus on February 22nd.
In New York, Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas has rejected the U.S. Middle East peace plan, calling it a gift to Israel. Speaking to the United Nations Security Council, he described the proposal as an Israeli-American plan to end the question of Palestine.
President Donald Trump's so-called peace plan for the Middle East has sparked outrage among Palestinians. As protests against the plan are going on in Palestine, President Mahmoud Abbas slammed the self-declared deal of the century at the UN Security Council. Abbas said the plan will splinter the Palestinian lands and never bring lasting peace to the region. Brandishing a large map of a future Palestine as laid out by Trump, Abbas denounced it as a Swiss cheese deal.
It was rejected by us because it considers that East Jerusalem is no longer under the sovereignty of the state of Palestine. That alone is enough for us to reject this plan. It leaves Palestine fragmented without any control on our land, air, and sea.
وستؤدي حتما.
Meanwhile, tens of thousands of Palestinians marched against the peace plan across Hebron, Ramallah, and Gaza cities. Israeli troops fired tear gas as protesters burned tires in Al-Bireh.
Palestinians are the ones who get to decide where are their borders and their lands. This is our land and this is our right. Trump or anyone other than Trump don't have the right to give away 1 inch of our land for the occupation. The deal of the century topic should not even be discussed after today. The people's attendance here is a strong evidence that Palestinians reject the deal of the century.
EU's top diplomat Josep Borrell has warned Israel of violence if it annexes the Jordan Valley.
Israel's former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert has extended his support to Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas against the US Middle East peace plan. In a press conference in New York, Olmert said Abbas is Tel Aviv's only partner for peace.
Olmert said that an Israeli-Palestinian peace requires direct negotiations between the two sides. He described Abbas as the only representative of the Palestinian people who is willing to negotiate with Israel.
He is a man of peace. He is opposed to terror. And therefore, he is the only partner that we can deal with. And it is important for me, as someone that negotiated with President Mahmoud Abbas for a long time.
Earlier, President Abbas categorically rejected the so-called peace plan at the United Nations Security Council, saying Palestine will never accept it.
In Lebanon, the new government has won a vote of confidence in the parliament, while protesters trying to block the session clashed with the security forces. Hundreds of people were injured as riot police fired tear gas at the protesters. The Lebanese Red Cross says 373 people were treated during day-long demonstrations. The parliament voted on a government policy statement saying it needed painful steps to address the financial crisis. Speaking before the vote, Prime Minister Hassan Abdaib described his government's task as a suicide mission.
We must be honest and acknowledge that the risk of collapsing is unfortunately not imaginary. We want to save the country, but we cannot complete this suicide mission if the ones standing behind us are waiting for the moment to push us over the edge without a salvage rope.
More stories to follow right after a short break. Welcome back. In China, the death toll from the new coronavirus has jumped to 1,113 victims, with over 44,000 infected in China. The National Health Commission says 97 people have died and 2,015 others were infected in the past 24 hours. More in this report.
While the number of new infections dwindle, deaths from the new coronavirus continue to rise. The World Health Organization has now named the virus COVID-19. The head of the WHO, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, says viruses could have more devastating consequences than any terrorist action.
We had to find a name that did not refer to a geographical location, an animal, an individual or group of people, and which is also pronounceable and related to the disease. Having a name matters to prevent the use of other names that can be inaccurate or stigmatizing.
In Japan, 39 more people have tested positive on the quarantined cruise ship, the Diamond Princess. It brings the total number of infections to 175. Tokyo's health ministry says testing is still underway and the number could rise.
Yesterday, we have found one official who had been quarantining on the cruise ship infected with the new coronavirus. This official was collected questionnaires from passengers on board.
With the virus spreading to 28 countries, several nations have evacuated their citizens from China, while others are becoming wary of trading with the country. White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien says the outbreak could affect the implementation of the Phase 1 trade deal.
The EU says it will host an extraordinary meeting of health ministers tomorrow to discuss the new coronavirus outbreak. The European Commissioner for Crisis Management says the conference will discuss the spread of the disease and the bloc's response. Meanwhile, a meeting of hundreds of top scientists is underway at the UN headquarters in Geneva to contain the spread of the disease. Earlier, WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus said the virus outbreak is a public enemy number one. Pakistan has convicted the chief of banned outfit Jamaat-ud-Dawa, Hafiz Saeed, in 2 terror financing cases. A Lahore anti-terror court has sentenced Saeed for 5-year imprisonment. Saeed was nominated in 29 cases of money laundering that assisted terror activities. In July last year, 13 top leaders of the banned outfit, including its chief Saeed, were booked under the Anti-Terrorism Act 1997. Saeed was arrested by the Counter-Terrorism Department in the same month. Protest sit-ins and rallies have continued across India against the controversial Citizenship Act since December the 12th. 27 people have been killed in mass protests against the ruling BJP's controversial act. The demonstrators have refused to end protests until withdrawal of the new law, largely considered anti-Muslim. Hundreds of Aligarh Muslim University students took out a candlelight march in protests against police action in Jamia Millia students. The all-women sit-ins continue in Delhi's Shaheen Bagh, Mumbai Bagh and Lucknow despite an armed attack. In India, the ruling BJP's recent massive defeat in New Delhi elections is rallying opposition parties together. Top leadership says the defeat shows India has rejected Prime Minister Narendra Modi's politics of hate. In Delhi Assembly polls, Aam Aadmi Party thumped Bharatiya Janata Party by winning 62 of 70 seats. Congress leader P. Chidambaram said people of Delhi have defeated polarizing, divisive and dangerous agenda of the BJP. West Bengal Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee said leaders using faith to legitimize hate speech should take a cue from this defeat. The former Chief Minister of Occupied Kashmir, Mehbooba Mufti, said Delhi has rejected vitriolic divisive politics. Philippines President Rodrigo Duterte has formally ended the 2-decade-old visiting forces agreement with the United States. Foreign Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. said Manila sent the termination notice to the U.S. Embassy in Manila. Duterte's spokesperson said ending the VFA was a consequence of the U.S. actions that undermine Filipino sovereignty and the judicial system. The decision was sparked by the revocation of a U.S. visa held by the former police chief who led Duterte's bloody war on drugs. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper called the ending of the agreement unfortunate, hoping it could be reversed or delayed. Closing the agreement complicates U.S. interests in the region in the face of growing Chinese power. The VFA underlines the overall U.S.-Philippines alliance. The termination will take effect after 180 days unless both the sides agree to keep it. Moving on to North Macedonia, where the parliament has unanimously approved an agreement to make the country a NATO member. A NATO flag was later raised in front of the parliament building in Skopje during a short ceremony. President Stevo Pendrovski said the final stage to North Macedonia's NATO membership has begun. Prime Minister Olivia Spotswisky also called the day historic, saying the country will become part of the world's most important security alliance. Spotswisky said Greece was the first NATO member to ratify the country's NATO membership. Spain is the only state yet to signal its approval. The accession protocol must be ratified by all 29 members. In the UK, an emergency terror law has been presented to the Parliament to end the release of convicted terrorists on parole. The law was drawn up after the Streatham attack in South London earlier this month. MPs will vote on the terrorist offenders bill before the Commons go into recess tomorrow. It will then move to the Lords, with the government hoping it becomes law by February 27. On February 2nd, an attacker stabbed 2 people in London days after he was set free halfway through his prison term. Justice Minister Robert Buckland says action needs to be taken.
Yesterday's appalling incident makes the case plainly for immediate action. We cannot have the situation, as we saw tragically in yesterday's case, where an offender, a known risk to innocent members of the public, is released early by automatic process of law.
The EU says 33% of its citizens were victims of cyber attacks in 2019. In its most recent report, the EU statistical authority Eurostat says 25% of all attacks were espionage, 12% were attempts to boost website traffic. Eurostat says password harvesting, using fraudulent messages, and the use of fake websites to steal personal information are the most frequent. It said people in Denmark experienced the most security-related problems at 50%. They were followed by France on 46%, Sweden with 45%, and Malta and the Netherlands with 42% each. It noted the EU will continue to focus on making the internet safer and better. The death toll from Storm Sierra, which is battering Europe, has risen to 7 on its journey east. The storm has closed transport and left hundreds of thousands without power. In northern France, the storm cut power to 130,000 homes. 35,000 households in northern Austria have also been left without electricity. Over 700 flights in 4 German cities, including Frankfurt and Düsseldorf, have been cancelled. Storm Sierra, called Storm Sabine in parts of Europe, has forced schools to close across Belgium, Germany and the Netherlands. In Australia, devastating fires have been wreaking havoc in the country's bushland since last June. Rains brought some measure of relief this year, but soon turned into damaging floods. Astoundingly, many Australians remain skeptical about climate change, despite ample evidence that it is exactly what's behind the ongoing environmental disaster.
This pile of burnt rubble was once the home of Jeff McCall, a farmer from the town of Buchan, Victoria. His house was surrounded by an inferno late last year and almost reduced to ashes. 23 other homes in this town were destroyed and 1 man was killed. Despite the scale of the disaster, many locals still don't believe climate change is the reason. Jeff McCall argues that if the climate change theory is correct, snowfall should have also ceased in the country.
Like, you never hear about climate change when it's snowing, do you? We had snow in December on the mountains. So, you know, where is it? And why is it just in one little spot?
Many of Buchan's residents are cattle farmers who say they feel attacked by climate activists' criticism of the meat and dairy industry.
We're not even anything to do with the footprint. They blame our cows and everything like that. And they're all jumping on electric trains and cars and God knows what in the city. There's millions of them flying around the world in jumbo jets and that. Well, you know, it takes a good cow to put out that many emissions, I can tell you.
But scientists say over 30 years of data suggest climate change is indeed real, and it needs to be tackled. They warn Australia's current plight gives them a glimpse into the future.
It fits exactly in line with the scientific evidence, both in terms of observational studies and future climate scenarios from physical models. So not only does it fit in with that, and it's the narrative that climate science has been given through the data for the last 30 or 40 years, it's a glimpse of the future.
As of January 2020, Australian bushfires have burnt an estimated 17 million hectares. This is an area equivalent to almost 24,000 football fields. Left unchecked, the country could see even more damage in the coming years.
European markets are trading higher after China recorded its lowest number of new coronavirus cases since January. Investors are buying back underpriced stocks as major shares track the global rally. Frankfurt's DAX is trading 0.75% higher. London's FTSE 100 and the CAC 40 in Paris each gained ground on a surge in oil shares. In Asia, the Shanghai Composite and Hong Kong's Hang Seng led the gains, closing nearly 1% higher. The Nikkei 225 also gained 0.75% as shares of the index heavyweight SoftBank Group leapt 12%. Meanwhile, prices of international Brent crude jumped nearly 2.5%. A slowdown in COVID-19 cases eased fuel demand concerns. And now the weather updates from around the globe. And that's all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.